which we commonly will be seeing, because nowadays we are saving very premature babies, because of which we need center line also, and we need to ventilate the baby on sometimes during the NICU stay. Although we are going towards non-invasive mode of ventilation and early and aggressive nutrition, but still we need center lines, and ventilator are also there. So this topic will cover center line associated bloodstream infection and ventilator associated pneumonias. Next. Okay, first we come to definition. What is VAP? VAP is defined as pneumonia in a patient who requires a device assist or control respiration either through a tracheostomy or through a ET tube for at least 48 hours. And before the onset of infection, and hospital-acquired pneumonia is defined as pneumonia that occurs 48 hours or more after admission, and which was not incubating at the time of admission. It means at the time of admission, the baby didn't have any pneumonia, but during our stay in the NICU, the baby developed this pneumonia, and VAP is maybe responsible for as much as 1/3 of the healthcare-related infections. They are various protective mechanism for lung parenchyma which prevent the infection. They are basically 4 anatomical barriers: cough reflex, trachobronchial, mucociliary linings and secretions, and CMI and humoral immunity, which is mediated by T cells and B cells. Now, what is the incidence of VAP? As you can see, incidence of VAP in less than 750 gram babies, it is 2.36 per 1000 device days, and in 750 to 1000 gram babies, it is 2.08. Therefore, the increased incidence is seen in babies who are ELBW or having a birth weight between 1 to 1.5 kg. Now, what is very difficult, rate of neonatal VAP is very difficult to establish. Important is that these babies, radiographic identification of neonatal pneumonia is very difficult. And these babies, in which suppose they have babies having prolonged ventilation, it could be ELBW or VLBW, then there might be changes in the lungs of BPD or atelectasis, changes could be there. And then in adults, which we go for bronchial lavage, which is not done usually in newborns and neonatal periods, because of which therefore diagnosis of VAP becomes tricky. Now, VAP is basically of 2 types: early onset VAP and late onset VAP. Early onset is within 5 days of mechanical ventilation, and the organisms are endogenous, like Streptococcus pneumoniae, H. influenzae. And late onset VAP, even babies having more than 5 days of mechanical ventilation, and cause could be aspiration of gastric or orophageal secretions. Like an organism will be very difficult to manage. That like drug-resistant organism like MRSA and Pseudomonas will be the common organism. Now, what are the risk factors for VAP? Most important is prematurity, less than 28 weeks baby, which are more prone to undergo ventilation. Birth weight less than 1500 grams, poor immunity, critically ill babies, duration of long duration of ventilation, other bloodstream infection, frequent suctioning and reintubation, use of narcotics such as morphine, which reduces the cough reflex, length of NICU stay, and use of steroid, which again decreases the immunity. So because these will be the risk factor. And once we come to pathogenesis, there are 2 sources of infection these babies. First is endogenous, it means neonatal own secretions, and exogenous, which are basically because from us, healthcare personnel and environment. And a colonization of ET tube and trachea with mechanical ventilation, within first 48 hours, it is gram-positive organism, and after 48 hours, they are gram-negative bacilli. So now, first we come to the source of endogenous source of microorganism. Like impaired natural protection, clearance system allows increased colonization of nasopharynx is there. Now, colonized oropharynx and gastric fluid pool among tubes in newborns will be there. Third will be colonized tracheal secretion. And these 3 secretion leads to some expiration of the colonized fluid in the lungs, leading to pneumonia. And other could be hematogenous spread from lungs may really cause pneumonia, like some babies having some bloodstream infection. These also can cause to pneumonia. But main will be endogenous source will be expiration of these contaminated secretions. An exogenous source of health microorganisms, health of by the hands of the healthcare worker, ventilator circuits, biofilm or endotracheal tubes. And these pneumonia occurs when colonized secretion are inhaled into the lungs through the endotracheal tubes. So these are both the endogenous source of infection and exogenous source of infection leading to VAP. Now, what are the most common organism? The bugs are most common are Pseudomonas aeruginosa and Staph aureus are the two most common organisms which are causing, followed by their H. influenzae, Streptococcus, and other organisms are there. So when we suspect WAP, so we need to cover these organisms. Now, what is the diagnosis of WAP? There again, as I told you initially, diagnosis of WAP in newborns is very tricky because these babies have changes of lungs similar to like BPD or atelectasis, and there's no fixed guidelines. CTC WAP criteria include radiographic, clinical, and microbiological elements, which all three should be present. Then we can label it babies in WAP. Radiographic criteria means new or progressive infiltrates or persistent infiltrates, consolidation, cavitation, pneumatocysts. Clinical criteria includes worsening of gas exchange, temperature instability, and three of the following like temperature instability, leukopenia, leukocytosis, new onset purulent sputum, like apnea, tachypnea, and these changes which are clinical changes which are happening in the babies. Microbiological criteria means in addition to radiographic clinical criteria, there should be positive growth in blood culture, and or pleural fluid also culture needs to be there. And as we all are neonatologists, we can see because these things are not feasible. We can't go for having a bronchial lavage in these newborns babies, and therefore the diagnosing WAP is a little bit tricky in the newborn period. And tracheal aspirate have low sensitivity, specificity, and positive predictive value diagnosing WAP. Therefore, again, tracheal aspiration is not recommended for diagnosing of WAP in newborn period. And WAP diagnosis in adults using clinical biomarkers like CRP, soluble trigger receptor express on myeloid cell, T1 cells, or procalcitonin have been done. But neither of these have been used in newborns to diagnose WAP. So diagnosis, there is no clear consensus guideline for the optimal treatment of WAP. Now, as I told you, most common organisms are Pseudomonas and Staph, so we can go for anti-pseudomonal agents like Pibzo or Ticarclave, or carbapenem for extensive beta-lactamase producing organism, and vancomycin for gram-positive organism. So we can go for this. Now, important is that prior to treatment, important is prevention. So how we can prevent this WAP? By going for a WAP care bundle. So it has got these 6 components like hand hygiene, endotracheal tube care, position of infant, stress ulcer prophylaxis, oral hygiene, and daily assessment of readiness to wean. So we'll cover one more topic. First is hand and hygiene. The best method to prevent hospital-acquired infection, including WAP, is to practice good hand hygiene, including use of antimicrobial soap and water and alcohol-based hand rubs. So importance should be given to the proper hand washing. Now, in this figure, you can see that the examining doctor is touching the bassinet of the baby with his hand, which is really not recommended. So once we examine the baby, so our hand should not be touching the bassinet, because again, we will be giving some source of infection to the baby. Nails should be, there should be no nails grown in the of the staff and doctors which are examining, we are taking care of the baby. There should be no use of hand polish or watches should not be used for in these in the NICU. Again, no jeans should be not be there. There should be no rings and bangles. Nothing should be used in the staff should not be wearing either a rings or bangles, and jeans, they are strictly to be avoided in the NICU. Now, when we need to use wash hand with soap and water when they're visibly dirty or soiled with blood or other body fluids, or after using the toilet. Use of an alcohol-based hand rub for all routine antisepsis if the hands are not soiled. Wear mask, cap, and gloves. Do not touch baby environment with gloves. So important that we should take proper care. Hand washing should be done, and every healthcare person which is taking care of the baby, they should know the importance of hand washing. Now, second is endotracheal tube care. Now, tracheal tube intubation. They start from the intubation, asepsis, maintain asepsis technique. Mask and gloves should be worn. Oral intubation preferred over nasal. And silver-coated ET tubes can be used because silver is antibacterial, so it could be used if this is available to you. Suction technique. Aseptic precaution during suction. Open suction is as good as closed suction technique. No routine use of saline. Saline, if only tenacious secretions are present, it should be used. No stock solution of saline. Fresh saline water should be opened. Suction each time. Suction catheter, one for each suction procedure. Prompt again. Second is prompt optimum humidification. Heated humidifier air should be used with having inspirated temperature of 37 degree with 100% relative humidity. There should be no condensation in inspiratorium. Drain condensate and water tap should be used to drain the condensate. Consider condensate as an infectious waste and discard accordingly. Hand wash after contact with condensate. Use distilled water humidifier. Always use the autofill technique for the humidifier to fill water, because this technique will prevent again and again opening of the humidifier, and no source of infection will be entering it. Now in this figure, you can see first figure, there is visible condensation is present in the inspiratorium, which is not good. In the second figure, there is minimal or no condensation in the inspiratorium, and there is condensation present in the expiratorium, which is okay. And important is shorten the duration of intubation. Go for non-invasive mode of ventilation as much as possible. Go for CPAP, NMV. Prevent unplanned extubation, patient self-extubation. Avoid unnecessary intubation. Post-extubation, there should be frequent change in position. Oral nasal suction should be done. Nebulization SOS, and we should watch for respiratory distress. Now, third is the position of infant, which is very important. (30° elevation of hand should be there. Lateral decubitus is preferred position. As supine position leads to increase in GER, and horizontal position of endotracheal tube. And many of the centers which from where I am in Jaipur, I am working, the people, their doctors keep the ET tube 90 degrees to the cradle bassinet, but it should be parallel to the bassinet. Now, next is stress as a prophylaxis. Acid gastric content prevents bacterial colonization. Avoid using antacid like ranitidine. If required, you can go for sucral. Sucral, because it covers the surface and it doesn't increase the pH. Promote enteral feeding using OG tube, and it should be started as soon as possible. Ventilation not a contraindication. If possible, go for express EBM. Prefer EBM over formula feeds, because they will be giving antibodies also for the baby. Now, next is the oral hygiene. Oral suction to prevent pooling of secretions. Always suction nose before mouth. Moisten the lip with saline. Avoid reusable suction cues for oral suction. Mucus bulb suction avoided for oral suction. Nowadays, I don't think people will be using for bulb suction. Chlorhexidine oral application is optional. Important oral suctioning should be to prevent oral secretion. Oral hygiene should be taken care of. And last is the daily assessment of readiness to weaning. Reduce duration of ventilation as much as possible. Prefer non-invasive mode of ventilation over invasive, like go for CPAP or NMV or triple HFNC when compared to, if possible, when compared to IMV mode of ventilation. But this is a summary how we can prevent VAP with preventive strategy like limiting antibiotic exposure, routine mouth care, good hand hygiene, wear gloves, and prevention and other like using non-invasive ventilation, reducing length of ventilation, preventing unplanned extubation, and these things we need to important that we need to have a bundle, VAP preventive bundle. That should be taken care of. So this covers our first topic of VAP of the today's talk. Now, second topic is clepsy. Clepsy means central line associated bloodstream infection, which is defined as where the central line umbilical catheter was in place for more than 2 calendar days on the date of event, with days of device placement being day 1. So after 2 days, any culture is called as the clepsy. It's account for almost 70% of HAI among NICU. Now, with the use of these bundle approaches, the incidence of clepsy is reduced. There are 2 types of source of infection. First is extraluminal and other is intraluminal. Intraluminal contamination means colonization of the catheter hub, contact with contaminated infusate. Extraluminal contamination means insertion site colonization with the neonate own skin flora or flora transferred from the clinician hand. Hematite contamination is spread from a distant site. Most common organisms are cons, methicillin-sensitive Staph aureus, MRSA, Enterococci, Candida species, and gram-negative organism. Now, risk factor: gestational age. More the primary the baby, higher the risk of epilepsy. Birth weight again, same for the VAP. Duration of hospitalization. Presence of central catheter, use of parenteral nutrition and mechanical ventilation, lack of enteral feeding. So you can see that both the risk factor are both of VAP and epilepsy are almost same. And in this slide, you can see as the duration of PICC line or UVC or increases, the incidence of epilepsy odds ratio of having infection increases. Like similarly for TPN. So we should reduce the duration of PICC line and UVC and TPN by going for early nutrition. Early and as soon as possible, we should start nutrition. Enter nutrition. Now, prevention of epilepsy, most important, basic component again, a bundle approach, promotion of hand hygiene, optimization central catheter insertion, use and removal, infection surveillance and communication, antimicrobial stewardship, use of organic specific preventive strategies. These we will cover all the topics in the coming slides. Insertion bundle, most important. Establish central line kit or cart. We should have all the necessary items. Perform hand hygiene with either alcohol-based or antiseptic containing soap before palpation of the insertion site and after doing insertion of the cannula. Use maximum barrier precautions. Disinfect skin with appropriate antiseptics before catheter insertion. Minimize the number of access ports. Keep connecting ports with UAC, UVC away from the diaper areas. So this is for the insertion bundle. Use either sterile transparent, like you can go for Tegaderm, so that we can see insertion site daily. Ensure the catheter tip at proper position. There should be no blood stain at the insertion site. So this covers the insertion bundle, which we need to take care once we go for the insertion of the PICC line. Now, second comes to maintenance bundle. Perform hand and hygiene with alcohol-based or antiseptic containing soap before touching the central line. Evaluate the catheter insertion site daily for signs of infection and dressing integrity. If the site is damp, soiled, or loose, then we need to change the dressing with all asepsis precautions. Develop and use standardized intravenous tubing setup. Maintain antiseptic technique when changing IV tubings and when entering the catheter, including scrub the hub. In it, when we change it, we scrub the hub, which I will tell you in the next slide. Daily review of catheter necessary if we need it, and try to remove the lines as early as possible. And next is the hub care bundle. Hub care bundle, many cleans hand with soap and water and put gloves. Establish sterile field under access port and place syringes on its edge. Scrub access port with chlorhexidine for 10 seconds and allow to dry. And pick the syringe, keeping tip sterile. Attach syringe to hub, keeping connection sterile. Administer flush solution, keeping connection sterile. So first is the insertion bundle. Second is maintenance bundle. Third is the hub care bundle. We need to take care of all these things to prevent the epilepsy. Change tubing after every 96 hours for most fluids. Change lipid containing lines after every 24 hours. Change tubing with each infusion of blood products. Use of 2 clinicians for tubing changing, one in sterile guard and one in non-sterile assistant. So these things should be taken care of. Other tried interventions which have been done is use of vancomycin locks, not recommended. Low dose vancomycin infusion, again not recommended because chances of developing drug resistant staph. Chlorhexidine or silver alginate impressed CVC site dressing. Foreign prophylaxis for Candida epilepsy. Now come to antibiotic stewardship. Guidelines for antibiotic therapy, initiation, choice, and discontinuation should be there of the unit. Surveillance for colonization with antibiotic resistant organism. Isolation, precaution of patient colonized or infected with antibiotic resistant organism. Foreign profile targeted to high risk infant less than 1250, 1050 grams babies, we can go for prophylaxis. Depending upon the incidence of Candida sepsis in your unit. Infection accounting, real-time data collection of center line, days, cultures, resistance, and other things should be taken care of. Communication with staff regarding CLABSI and overall late onset incidents, LOS sepsis incidents, and every time we need to see for root cause analysis should be done. Now come to a conclusion. VAP and CLABSI are important hospital-acquired infection. ELBW are most susceptible for VAP and CLABSI. Both can be prevented by using bundle approach. Treatment includes early diagnosis and antibiotics. Thank you. Now we are open for discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak, for an excellent talk about how we are going to prevent VAP and central line associated bloodstream infections in units. So we have some questions in the question answer box. So can we, Akash, can we go ahead with the questions?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay, so Dr. Pragati Sisodia is asking whether we can instill normal saline in endotracheal tube during sectioning, or there any other methods to clear the thick secretions?
Usually it is not required to go for NS solution every time, but if suppose thick secretions are there, the NS is okay. Normal saline is okay.
Yes.
And that also 2 or 3 drops. First we can put 2 to 3 drops, then do for 1 or 2 bagging. Then again, then we can go for suctioning. That will be good enough.
Oh, right. So she's also asking, are there any other methods to clear the thick secretion? Like what do you think about using of like mucomics or secretion thinning agents like nebulization with mucomics or something like that, or a simple saline before suctioning?
As much as my experience of last 10 years, simple saline is good enough for doing all these secretion suctioning. I have hardly used mucomics in my career till yet, in my 10 years experience till yet.
Right, thank you. She's asking another question about whether we are using, like, it is basically 2 questions similar, meaning like using open versus closed suctioning catheter. So what is in your experience, or what is the evidence?
They both are okay. They both are basically equally efficacious. Important is that how good is your staff been trained in that? Because once we go for open and closed, because important is that how many, suppose if we are going for a closed system and the staff is not well trained in it, then is no use. You can go for either open and closed system, but depending upon how much your staff knows those things, man.
Yeah, that's very true. That it will always depend upon the nursing care that you are going to provide, and whether your staff are very well. Like you have to train if you are using a closed system and catheter, but we cannot keep the open catheter in a sterile cover and then reuse it, because the cover will in any case will be open, right?
So that we need to change every time, ma'am.
Yeah, that we need to change if you are using an open system, right? So that answers, I think, Dr. Pragati's question. The next question is by Dr. Lokeshwari Baleda. She's asking about usage of sedative and muscle relaxant on ventilator.
There's no, actually, as per the Goldsmith also, there's no role for giving skeletal muscle relaxant for the babies. Because what happens when we give SMR to the baby, the work of breathing becomes zero, which the baby is trying to compensate for the respiratory distress. So I haven't used any SMR till yet, ma'am. Or for analgesia, you can go. If suppose your baby having pain, you're feeling baby having pain, then you can go for morphine or fentanyl SOS.
Yes, so that's the correct way. The another question is about how to calculate the VAP rate and what is the incidence in India, like our country.
What I told you, as I discussed in the presentation, there is no fixed criteria for defining VAP in newborns. So could be, suppose we are labeling VAP, it could be congenital pneumonia also, or it could be either way also. So as per my knowledge, there is no exact data over the VAP in Indian studies, because as there will be overlap will be there, and as CDC guidelines are what are there for adults, there is no specific guidelines for newborns, and they are hardly to follow. Because suppose babies having day 4, day 5, babies having pneumonia, it could be because of exit picture suggestive pneumonia. It could be because of stage 1 or stage 2 BPD. That becomes a little bit tricky.
Right. Many of the participants are asking about frequency of suctioning, like in case of copious secretions, how frequently we should suction.
We should suction only when there are visible secretions are there. And other thing, you can suppose if you're using graphics, ventilator is there, you can use graphics to guide, tell us that there are now secretions are coming in the graphs, then you can go for suctioning. But as such, we can't recommend that every 2 hours you need to suction. It depends upon if visible secretions are there, you can go for suctioning. If suppose you feel the baby is now becoming uncomfortable, initially baby was comfortable on ventilator on that setting, now baby is having tachypnea, and graphs are suggestive of secretions are there in speed, then you can go for suctioning.
Yeah, that's correct. So whenever there are visible secretions, then you can go have to do suctioning, and also ventilator graphics assist in that. So I think that answers 2 of the participants' questions. Dr. Gaurav is asking about whether you suction nose before mouth or mouth before nose. So I think it's mouth before nose.
Oral. First oral need to be done.
So we always am come before. So you have to use another catheter to suction over mouth first, and then another catheter to suction the endotracheal tube.
Yes, yes. Both sections should be definitely, they should be separate.
Right. Dr. Madhur Anand is asking, I think this you have covered in talk, but then once again, you can tell them how to calculate the CLABSI rate and what are the common organisms.
CLABSI, we can see how many babies we have been into, we have put a central line, how many days, and which babies had blood culture positive sepsis. So we can calculate by this. And most common organism are, cons is the most common organism, methane sensitive Staph aureus, MRSA. They are the Staph will be the most common organism will be there.
Right. So I think that answers Gautam's question, Dr. Gautam's question. The next is by Dr. K. Kalyan. He is asking for some tips for resource limited settings with limited disposables and manpower.
Please repeat the question.
He's asking some practical tips for resource limited settings with limited disposables and manpower, how we should go about these bundles in their setting.
That's become a little bit tricky.
Manpower.
Important is that we should avoid, most important, we should avoid intubation. We should go for early nutrition, and aggressive nutrition should be our goal. So that once the babies are full feed as soon as possible, we have babies off ventilator also, and babies off central line also. These things should be, breast milk, EBM milk should be taken care of. Babies should be given that.
Yeah, so that's correct. Like if you have limited manpower and limited disposable, you have to basically try and use non-invasive ventilation as far as possible, and go for early. Yes, please go ahead.
And important should be done proper hand washing, which is very easily done, very cheap. Hand washing. That will take care of many of the things which are problems which are happening in the NICU.
That's right. That's the basis. Basically, you have to maintain asepsis in all things. It's not about the manpower, or it's not about how much things you are having. It is about your innate dedication or innate ability to like touch the baby only when required, and follow proper asepsis. If that can be instilled, then we do not require so much of bundles as well, I suppose.
Obviously.
Yes. So another question is by, again, Dr. Pragati, that should the ET tube tip routinely send for cultures during extubation?
No, not recommended. Not recommended, because I just told you that tracheal aspirate are neither sensitive nor specific for diagnosing an organism. That organism which will come in ET tube tip could be normal commensal also, could be pathogenic also. Again, it will become tricky for you. So important will be blood culture of these babies. first we need to know which organism which are coming in our NHU, most common organism. So we can decide about the antibiotics on those antibiotic on the antibiotic spectrum of the organism.
So I totally agree. So there's no point in sending any leaky tube cultures at extubation. Dr. Boni is asking how to apply chlorhexidine and how much amount in a ventilated unit. So that thing you told as an optional thing.
Option, but it's not recommended as such, because so you can go. Their mouth gargles are there. We can apply them. Mouth gargles are there, so which can be used.
So amount. He's asking about how much amount in a ventilated unit.
0.05%, if I remember it.
Yeah, I also remember kind of. It should not be very concentrated. It should be diluted and maybe 1 ml. Okay. And Dr. Himanshu is asking whether there's any role of cutting the endotracheal tube and attaching to the hub in preventing VAP, as it will likely reduce the surface area or colonization.
No, there's no role for that for prevention of VAP. That could be, that plays some role in reducing the dead space.
Yes. So that practice is basically to reduce the dead space ventilation.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And Dr. Lokeshwari is again asking how many days we can use PEEK line or umbilical line.
How many?
How many days at a stretch we can use PEEK line or an umbilical line?
There's no timing of PEEK line as such, but UVC 10 to 14 days maximum you can go for that. UVC 10 to 14 days. PEEK line, if suppose there's no edema, then you can continue.
Yes, right.
And there's no clepsy. If there's no clepsy also, if we diagnose clepsy, the central line needs to be removed as immediately.
Right. Again, Dr. Boni is asking why the change of the circuits, ventilator circuits after prolonged ventilation is not recommended now.
As Dr. Akash told me, the latest systematic review, this is not recommended. If suppose there is visible soiling, then we can change. If there's no visible soiling, there's no blood, there's no need for changing the ventilator circuit so frequently.
Dr. Boni, it is because that when we change the circuits, the outcomes do not change. It only increases the cost. So because we are not getting any different results, whether we change or not change the circuits, that's why we recommend that continue with whatever circuit you have, unless it is soiled.
Soiled, visibly soiled.
Yes, that's right. So there's no point in, there is no recommendation of routine changing. So if there is some visible soiling, then only we have to change it. Are there any further more questions? Like everybody is, can we unmute them and ask direct? They can ask direct questions.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. If anybody wants to ask question, kindly raise hands. We'll unmute you. Anybody wants to ask directly, kindly raise your hands so we can unmute you. There is one more question. There is one more question, ma'am, in the question answer box.
Okay, so she's asking about can we use feeding tube? Dr. Pragati is asking, can we use feeding tube in place of umbilical line for IV access?
No, it should not be done because there's very high chances of babies having thrombosis. Because the material of feeding tube and umbilical, they are definitely different. So they should not be used.
So that's right. If it should not be used for like it, even in case of non-affording patient. But if you do not have anything and it's like just for a temporary life-saving thing, you may use like in resuscitation, but not for keeping it. It's just like you give something and then take it out and put your umbilical line. So it is that you should not use it. And any role of heparin flush after certain duration in long lines to reduce this clepsy and thromboembolic?
No, ma'am.
So it's just a normal saline that we have to keep it
normal saline
for patency.
and
Right.
UAC for PICC line and UVC, there's no need for putting a patency because that will be going on regularly. Fluid will be going on. And UAC, that umbilical RT, you can use for heparin. What in our unit we called 5 units heparin, we mix in 50 ml of NS, then we started 0.5 ml per hour.
Right. So you do not recommend it normal saline even for PICC line patency?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No.
Okay. Because in routine practice, we often found that if we do not give some patency in PICC line, there is a tendency to get it blocked.
When suppose the fluid is very less, 1 ml per hour, then in the next day we'll be removing. We will be removing because now baby is stable. Then we can remove PICC line. Then if suppose minimal fluid is going, then at that time we can remove PICC line because benefits will be less compared to harm.
Yeah, that's true because it is external source that is going on.
Also, right. I have seen so many complications because of PICC line and UVC. I'm really scared. I have seen cardiac. Akash would have also
tamponade.
Seen fusion, pleural refusion, cardiac tamponade. We have seen so many thrombosis.
Yeah, that's true. So, what about prone positioning, prone nursing in prevention of VAP?
Prone is
Dr. Lokeshwari is asking again.
Prone position, you can go for it because it decreases the incidence of GER, but as such, it will not. Its role in prevention of VAP is still questionable. It definitely will reduce the incidence of GER.
Right. So, there are any further questions? Participant can directly unmute and ask.
If anybody wants to ask any question, kindly raise your hand and ask directly from the speaker. Or we will start asking the questions. I think there are no more questions. No more questions, ma'am.
Yeah. So I have one, so recently I was just reading about this line. So may I ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
So this is something like new thing, like I was just reading a few days back about use of tunneling of central venous catheters for prevention of this bloodstream infection, the subcutaneous tunneling. Like we have seen in adults and children, but in units, it's like not many have used it. But this is the recent thing that I was just reading a few days back. So anything about like you subcutaneously tunnel the main lines, basically the femoral or IJVs in surgical patients like this, or those patients who required long-term drugs or parenteral nutrition in that way.
Okay.
There are actually, ma'am, anecdotal case reports and a few small case series regarding use of tunneled catheters in neonates. What they say that it not only decreases infection, but also decreases the pain. But still, it has not been taken up as practice because the size of the tunneled catheter is not available for premature babies and VLBW babies, and also the ELBW babies, which majority of the sick babies in our NICUs are ELBW and VLBW babies. And these are the babies who go on to have prolonged lines. So we don't have a proper size which fits for these small tiny babies. And also whatever is available only in few countries. So unless and until it is taken up as a practice, the study shows its benefit, then only it will be produced in a mass scale. But yes, if you have them visible, you have them available at your place, and for that you also need training, because not everybody can pull tunnel catheters. So if you have availability, you have training, definitely you should go for tunnel catheters, but not as a routine practice, only for limited practice where you know that baby is going to have line for months altogether, or for research purposes as of now.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask, for the benefit of the audience also, how is bundle care approach different from the usual prevention?
Bundle care approach, ma'am, things are same only, but important is that people know what to be done. When it's like something, it is like a systematic approach. There will be checklist will be there. We need to do this, so that nothing is missed and everything is done systematically. Basically, it's a comprehensive approach.
Okay, thank you.
Kirti ma'am, there are no more questions.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
I lost the connection in between. Okay. So I think we are done. Are there any further questions from participants?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Deepak, for an excellent talk and entertaining discussion.
Thank you, Kirti ma'am, for moderating this session wonderfully and taking us through thick and thin of VAP and CLABSI bundle. Also like to thank the speaker, Dr. Deepak Sharma sir, whom I have been associated for quite a long time. Thank you, sir, for sparing your valuable time and sharing your practical experience.
Thank you for inviting me for the same.
Always a pleasure, sir. Now I invite President Lucknow Neonatology Foundation to say a few concluding words. Vijaya ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Deepak, for an excellent talk. And thank you, Akash. As I said earlier, it's a very well-organized program, and I'm sure it's going to benefit all the students who are quite diligently attending the series. And we still have a long way to go, and hopefully we'll have a good time for the next month as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you again. Thanks to our speaker, moderator, and Vijaya ma'am. And thanks to the panelists. Last but not the least, Mr. Tapan. He has been our man behind the scene. He manages Zoom, he manages WhatsApp groups, and he responds to all the queries. So 3 cheers to Mr. Tapan and to the participants who take time from, because as a doctor, we only get free weekend. So taking time to attend these classes on a weekend days really needs effort and really needs commitment. Thank you all. Thank you, Kirti ma'am. With that, we end today's session.
Thank you, Akash. Good job. And we love to hear from you and the esteemed speakers. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Good night to all. Thank you.
Good night.